Federal agents shot an American ICU nurse 10 times while he was face down on the ground. And then the Secretary of Homeland Security called him a domestic terrorist. And now it turns out the people who actually run the agencies that did this say they never told her that, which means the head of the Department of Homeland Security made up a story to cover up the death of a man who was holding a phone and had committed the apparently unforgivable crime of standing on a public sidewalk in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which I guess we're supposed to accept because, you know, things happen. So this clip is from the Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing on February 12th. And what you're about to watch is Senator Gary Peters, the top Democrat on the committee, questioning CBP Commissioner Rodney Scott and acting ICE Director Todd Lyons about the death of Alex Pretti. And what happens here is one of those rare Washington moments where the witnesses accidentally blow up the administration's entire story by simply answering no to a very simple question. Take a look at this, and I will give you my take later.
Senator Peters.
So we just watched on the video of previously American citizens that were basically being manhandled and pushed and hit and beaten with canisters. We didn't see on the video, but 95% of them, or 90+% of Americans who have seen that video, also shot Alex Pretti shot 10 times while laying face down in the back by law enforcement officers. And we also know he was basically just holding a phone, being manhandled and shot 10 times. So I just want to confirm with you, filming federal officers on a public street is not illegal, is it, Mr. Scott, Mr. Lyons?
Correct.
No, sir.
He did not, at least looking at the video, all of us who've watched the video, he did not attempt to harm law enforcement. No appearance of that. Is that correct?
I don't know what happened once he was on the ground, sir.
When he was laying face down with several people
With a
on top
weapon
of
in
him?
his waistband initially. And I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying I can't jump to that conclusion because I don't know what happened on the ground. That's why there's an investigation still ongoing. Standing up, I would agree with what you just said.
Okay. So when he's on the ground with a bunch of officers on top of him after he's been hit with a canister, he was somehow still possibly harmed to law enforcement, you're saying? It's possible?
That's happened thousands of times, yes. And
Okay. Mr. Lyons, really? You saw him that as a possible threat?
Sir, from the, that wasn't an ICE operation, that was a CBP operation.
I get it, but you're a highly trained professional.
Yes, sir. No, obviously, there's not enough evidence to speak to, but that's the best thing about this is the fact that I can speak for ICE, Office of Professional Responsibility, as well as CBPs, that they're the same, that we have to have a full investigation, and it has to come out.
Okay.
We have to base that training on that.
So you have to have a full investigation. What everybody saw in the video, there might be some extenuating circumstances. We just don't know, but the video is very clear. And yet we had the Trump administration claim that he was attempting to inflict mass casualties. You're gonna have to explain how you had that come to that, how the Trump administration came to that conclusion when you can't even come to the conclusion that he may have been resisting when he was laying flat on his back with being beaten. How did they come to the fact that he was going to have those mass casualties? And then, quote, Secretary Noem said he was committing, quote, an act of domestic terrorism. What you saw in the video, is that what you train your officers? Someone laying on the ground, that's an act of domestic terrorism? Commissioner Scott and Acting Lyons, did you provide Secretary Noem with an assessment of what Mr. Pretti was engaged in and that he was engaged in domestic terrorism? Is that why she said that? Is because you told her? That was your belief at that time? Even though you need an awful lot of investigation now to know exactly what happened. Are you the ones that told her that?
no, sir.
No, sir.
Did anyone who reports to either of you provide this assessment to Secretary Noem that this was mass casualty, or he was attempting to inflict mass casualties and domestic terrorism? Did someone in your staff tell her that?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
No,
So
sir.
why would Secretary Noem, why would she tell the public that this was an act of domestic terrorism when right in the heat of the moment? How would she possibly come to that kind of conclusion to tell the American public that when they're watching this video?
I can't speculate on what someone else would say or why, sir.
Mr. Lyons?
Sir, I can't speculate to what the Secretary thought at that time, sir.
So it seems to me a really big question, which means that we have to have Secretary Noem here. She deserves it. The American people deserve to have the secretary, the person who is responsible to, you are responsible to, and all the men and women ICE answer to her. She needs to be before this committee. She ducks coming out in public and talking and hasn't accepted prior invitations to come to this committee. I would hope the chairman would invite her, because this is an important question. How could you come to those conclusions, those narratives, before any evidence was there? Even after all that's happened since then, you two are telling me you don't have enough evidence, even though it looks so clear on the video. It should have looked really clear to her if she looked at the video, if she had it that close. A lot of this got posted pretty quickly. How she came to those conclusions, I don't expect you to know that. You didn't provide any information to her, which makes me question it even more. If she got no information from you in the chain of command, how would you come up with that kind of narrative if the chain of command wasn't doing it? Acting Director Lyons, we have all seen multiple instances of DHS personnel jumping out of unmarked cars. They will have weapons drawn. They're wearing masks. They don't have clear identification. And this, of course, immediately will escalate an encounter with the public. There's no way around it that's not escalatory when you see that coming at you. Often these masked individuals are only wearing a sign on their vest that just says police. This is the type of vest that can be easily purchased by anyone and used to basically impersonate an officer. In fact, last year, this administration, the Trump administration's FBI released a bulletin entitled, and I'm going to put this in the record without objection, Mr. Chairman, "Criminal Actors Impersonate ICE Agents to Commit Violent Crime." Are you aware of this bulletin put out by the FBI?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, sir.
So I'll put this in the record if I may, Mr. Chairman. So given this, the FBI is warning people that criminals are impersonating immigration officers. My question to you is, how can you expect any U.S. citizen to follow orders from an unidentified masked man surrounding them, given we know there are these impersonators out there that are, according to the FBI, committing a lot of crime because they're terrified. They don't know what's going on. They don't know who these people are, or they falsely believe they're a federal agent, and they aren't. They're a violent criminal. So, I mean, these tactics are causing fear. They're chaos in our communities. It's why we need, I think, to have common sense reforms to rein in these practices. What we're advocating is that the men and women who are federal agents just follow the same rules that our local police follow. Our local police are highly professional. I have the greatest respect for them. They do amazing work and put their life in harm's way regularly, but they have a set of rules that they have to follow. And that's not happening with what we're seeing with with agencies related to the federal government. So I think we should have a legitimate discussion about that safety and reasonable practices going forward. And I would hope that you would support that. Just in general, do you think that you should follow the same rules of those followed by local police in our communities? Is that reasonable, Mr. Scott?
I believe you're talking about uniform standards. At CBP, we do. You have to have a name tag. It has to be clearly identified. There are times we've made exceptions on the name tag, and we used a different identifier, but it was an individual identifier so people knew who they were. And all of our agents and officers have to carry their credentials with them and their real badge with them.
So all across the board, there are a wide range. We put together a proposal of a wide range of practices that have been adopted by police organizations all across the United States of America. Would you feel comfortable abiding by the same kind of regulations and guidelines that local police follow on a whole host of issues?
I would look at those. I believe that very different law enforcement organizations have different considerations, but the general concepts, yes, and I think we do currently follow.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes, sir, I'm open to that, but one thing I'm also open to too, sir, is looking for the help from this committee and other elected officials, not only to help us bring down the rhetoric, but help us to hold those people accountable that are threatening ICE officers and agents. I think to dispel the fear of the men and women of ICE, that'd be huge. That would be a real step going.
As we've looked at the complaints, and Senator Peters has brought this up, one of the things from a lot of the different videos that are out there is the complaint that the officers are quick on the draw. Basically, they're drawing weapons. I know there are rules for the police drawing weapons. A lot of times I've been told you don't draw it unless you're planning on using it or unless there really is an imminent threat. There's some subjective nature to figuring that out. But, There was one video of a woman, you don't have to come out of the specifics, but, in a hypothetical, woman has come to a stop. She has not brandished a weapon. Her car is stopped. The ICE agents get out, all guns drawn. That to me doesn't seem like it would be consistent with your policy. What is the policy on when you draw your weapon? Each of you, Mr. Scott first.
Within CBP, when the officer feels there's a threat, but in this specific, like the scenario you outlined, and not that specific, but with the vehicle can and is often used as a weapon. When we train to do felony stops, basically the officers, when they stop that vehicle, they're trained to have their weapons out and ready because they're stopping a felony. So it's not that simple that you have to wait until you see a weapon. Sometimes it's literally that officer presence to keep the situation under control. But the weapon's only supposed to be pulled when the agents believe that it is required to affect that law enforcement action.
In this instance, I don't think it was a person that was targeted. I think it was a person they might have had some suspicion of. It wasn't a person that was targeted. The problem is that nobody really looks at this, particularly this one instance, and thinks the police would do it that way. When police make traffic stops, they avoid the car, they come from behind the car, they'll often have their hand on their weapon, but you almost never see a policeman with a gun drawn on a traffic stop or any kind of stop unless they've either seen a weapon or they really are in fear of their life. I think, and this is just my opinion, you have to look at what your rules are for drawing weapons, because it appears to me they're not using the same standard as the police.
Sir, I could just speak to my experience. I've done thousands of traffic stops, like I said. I was a 10-year city police officer prior to coming to ICE. And obviously, our training, we do fall back on the two main Supreme Court decisions, Tennessee versus Gardner, for one. And, we can't speak to the totality of the circumstances, especially in the case where we don't know exactly what it is. We can't go to that officer's mindset. So each one is separate. But if you look at the use of force, curriculum in the pyramid, officer presence is include one of those things. So to your point, sir, I've done it many times myself, felony traffic stop. In the case of ICE, oftentimes we do know it's a felon or wanted felon that we're going after. The firearm may be drawn. But again, each case is.
I think it does make a difference whether you're stopping a target who's a felon stop versus stopping a random person. In the instance that was displayed recently in the news, I don't believe it was a felony stop. I don't even believe it was a targeted stop.
No, sir, that's what I meant, to your point.
This, I think, probably was somebody filming that was annoying them or pestering them, and then they went and they followed the person and stopped them. And I think the weapons being drawn was inappropriate, but I would suggest that you need to look at these and you need to look at the policy, because I don't think they're living up to the same standard of the police. I think the police, frankly, are better trained, which is the other complaint that people have had. Have we rushed some of the people into the job, and have we not had adequate training? Senator Langford.
Alex Pretti was a 37-year-old ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital, a federal employee, by the way, a member of the American Federation of Government Employees, a union brother, a guy who spent his career taking care of veterans. He had a legal Minnesota permit to carry a gun. He had zero criminal record. The city's own police chief, Brian O'Hara, not a Democrat in Congress, the local police chief said Pretti had never had any run-in with law enforcement beyond a handful of traffic tickets. Now, within 2.5 hours of Pretti being shot, 2.5 hours, DHS put out a statement saying he had approached officers with a handgun and wanted to do maximum damage. Stephen Miller, the White House deputy chief of staff, jumped on social media and called Pretti a would-be assassin and said he tried to murder federal law enforcement. And Secretary Noem held a press conference that same day and said, and I want you to hear exactly how she put it, that Pretti was brandishing a weapon and committed an act of domestic terrorism. She said, and I'm barely paraphrasing, that this was someone who showed up to do as much damage as possible and hurt officers. That's what the Secretary of Homeland Security told the American people on the day this man died. But here's where the whole thing falls apart. Multiple videos looked at by CNN, Reuters, the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press all show the same thing. An officer reached into the group of agents, pinning Pretti to the ground, pulled the gun from his waistband holster, and walked away with it. CNN's breakdown of the footage shows that roughly 1 second after that officer walked away holding the weapon, the first shot was fired. A minute later, with Pretti's body lying still in the street, one officer can be heard asking, "Where's the gun?" and the officer who took it walked over and said, "I got the gun." They took his gun away first, then they shot him. And what you just saw in that hearing was the key moment. The people who actually run CBP and ICE, both of them said under oath that they did not tell Noem that Pretti was a domestic terrorist. Nobody who works for either of them told her that. So where did it come from? Well, CNN reported that Noem was talking nonstop with White House officials, including Stephen Miller, on the day of the shooting, and she was told by several White House officials how to talk about it at her press conference, including, and this is the big one, the line that Pretti had been brandishing a weapon, which turned out to be a lie. The story was cooked up in the White House and pushed out through the DHS secretary. And by the way, even Senator Thom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, said Miller went after Pretti before he had even talked with anybody on the ground, and added, quote, "Stephen Miller never fails to live up to my expectations of incompetence." And then there's the unmarked car problem that Senator Peters brought up. The administration's own FBI sent out a warning back in October 2025, their own FBI, saying criminals were pretending to be ICE agents to rob people, kidnap people, and commit sexual assaults, specifically because real agents work in masks, street clothes, and unmarked cars. The FBI flat out told the agencies to make sure you identify yourselves. And yet, as Peters pointed out, DHS agents are still jumping out of unmarked cars wearing vests that say police vests that anyone can buy on Amazon. So let's be clear. The FBI is telling Americans to watch out for criminals dressed as immigration agents, while actual immigration agents are dressing the exact same way as those criminals, and then they're shocked when things go sideways. It would be almost funny if it weren't getting people killed. So here's what you can tell someone who asks you about this. The administration called a dead American nurse a domestic terrorist within hours. And when the heads of the agencies who were actually there were asked under oath if they were the ones who said that, both of them said no. The story was made up at the political level to cover for a man being killed on video after agents had already taken his gun away while he was pinned to the ground. So what does this actually mean going forward? Think about what it means for you personally. The government can shoot you, and before your family even finds out what happened, the Secretary of Homeland Security and a senior White House advisor have already told 330 million Americans that you were a terrorist. They did this to a VA nurse with a legal gun permit and zero criminal record. It's like getting a 1-star Yelp review, except the reviewer is the federal government, and the review is domestic terrorist, and you can never respond. A CBS News poll from January 14th through 16th, about a week before Pretti was killed, found that 61% of Americans already felt ICE agents were being too tough. And that was before any of this happened. Now think about what this means for the country. What you're watching is the complete opposite of how the justice system is supposed to work. In a working democracy, there is an incident, then an investigation, then a conclusion. What this administration has done over and over is jump to a conclusion within hours, blast it out to the whole country, and then pretend to investigate after the fact. Former ICE Chief of Staff Jason Hauser told ABC News that this pattern shows the focus has moved away from keeping people safe and toward pushing a political story. And when Chairman Rand Paul, a Republican, told the witnesses at this hearing, people within the government made conclusions immediately, people aren't believing there's going to be an honest investigation, that should tell you everything about where trust in the government stands right now. And for what? Why did they need to call him a terrorist before Pretti's family even knew what happened? Why did Stephen Miller need to tweet before talking to a single person on the ground? Was it for public safety? No. The public was less safe because of what they did. Was it to protect their officers? No. Their own officers are now under a DOJ civil rights investigation. Was it because the facts backed it up? No. The video showed the opposite of every single thing they claimed within 24 hours. They did it because admitting that federal agents shot and killed an unarmed, face-down American nurse for filming them with his phone would have been a political disaster for the man who sent 3,000 agents into Minneapolis in what Trump himself once called retribution. That's it. That's the whole reason. They trashed a dead man's name to protect a policy. Charles Ramsey, the former top cop in both Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., reviewed the videos for CNN and said this doesn't look like a justified use of force. He said agents were swarming Pretti, too many officers tripping over each other, and that once the bosses went on TV and cleared the officers within hours, you can't expect a fair investigation after that. He called DHS leadership, and this is his exact word, out of control. And a former federal prosecutor who spent 15 years in the DOJ's Civil Rights Office wrote in Just Security that DHS put put out its final answered defensive shots taken out of fear for his life less than 3 hours after the shooting, before any real investigation had even started. For context, it takes me 3 hours to decide what to order on DoorDash, and the stakes there are way lower. Here's where things stand now. The DOJ Civil Rights Division is investigating what happened. Both agents have been pulled off the street and put on desk duty after they were originally kept working like nothing happened. Tom Homan announced on the same day as this hearing that the Minnesota Operation Metro Surge is done, and the body camera footage still hasn't been shown to the public. This isn't about immigration. It's not even really about one shooting, as terrible as it was. It's about whether the government of the United States can kill one of its own people, lie about what happened right away, have those lies called out by video and by their own officials under oath, and walk away like nothing happened. Because if the answer is yes, if you can do what they did to a nurse, call him what they called him, have your own people say under oath they never told you that, and still keep your job, then the question isn't whether you'll ever be on the wrong end of that. The question is what's stopping them. And remember, this was a man doing something so dangerous, so threatening to law enforcement, that it took 10 bullets to stop him. He was holding a phone on a public street. In America, I told you the bar was underground. Turns out, it's in the Earth's core. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button and drop a comment with your thoughts. It really helps the conversation reach more people. Share this with someone who needs to hear it so we can keep important discussions going. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss new updates when we post. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching and being here.